The second team you'll hear from today is led by CEJ Faculty Research Fellow Dr. Molly George. Dr. George is an assistant professor in the departments of criminal justice and sociology here at CLU. She received both her PhD and her MA in sociology from the University of California, Santa Barbara. And her research focus is on immigration detention and enforcement. And she is specifically interested in the criminalization of immigration. Her work has been published in journals like Sociological Inquiry, Teaching Sociology, and the Journal of Contemporary Ethnography. And she has a paper based on the CEJ Fellowship research that's currently under review. Dr. George's CEJ Student Research Fellow is Arely Rivera-Rojas. She's originally from Santa Maria, and she's a senior criminal justice major with a minor in Spanish. This past fall, she had an opportunity to study abroad, although a little closer than Thailand. She studied in Washington, D.C. She interned with Ayuda, which is a nonprofit organization that provides immigration services to low-income immigrants in D.C. and the surrounding area. And that experience, combined with her research internship and fellowship with Dr. George, has led her to want to help immigrant communities in the future. So in her short-term plan, she hopes to work with a local nonprofit organization which focuses on helping undocumented immigrants. And she also plans to become certified as a Board of Immigration Appeals accredited representative. Her long-term goal is to enroll in law school and become an immigration attorney. So please join me in a round of applause to welcome our CEJ Research Fellows.
Good afternoon. As Dr. Knapp mentioned, I'm Molly George, Assistant Professor of Sociology and Criminal Justice here at CLU.
And I am Arely Rivera-Rojas, an undergraduate criminal justice major here at CLU as well. We're very excited to be here today to share with you guys some insights from our research.
And the generous fellowship from the Center for Equality and Justice has allowed us to pursue an ambitious research agenda. We have focused on understanding immigration enforcement, one of the most complicated and divisive issues on our national agenda. We began right here on the central coast of California and have conducted interviews with immigrant advocates as well as members of local law enforcement. And we also had the opportunity to focus on a case study of one town in a different state that has a fairly unique approach to immigration enforcement in terms of being progressive and hands-off. And our talk today will primarily address the case study of that one police department in a different state. As you all know, the federal government has yet to provide adequate and comprehensive immigration reform. The ongoing debates in Congress are promising, but a lack of a consistent national approach has resulted in a patchwork system of immigration legislation on the state and local levels. On one end of the spectrum, you have the state of Arizona, with Governor Jan Brewer as well as the notorious Joe Arpaio, right? We kind of know this guy, this folk devil who's really pushing the frontier of aggressive immigration enforcement in Maricopa County. Receiving much less attention, you have cities such as San Francisco on the other end of the spectrum, which have ordinances that constrain local authorities from assisting in federal immigration enforcement. Thus, across city lines and state borders, undocumented immigrants face vastly different policies and climates that run the gamut from local police checking their immigration status during any interaction that takes place between law enforcement and community members, whether it be victims of crime or witnesses of crime, to the other end of the spectrum where you have police who are ostensibly acting under a don't ask, don't tell policy, really hands-off immigration enforcement. And despite the widespread political and media attention given to the different treatment of undocumented immigrants in the cities across the country, comparatively little attention has been paid to these topics among academics. Further, to date, we do not know much about how local law enforcement, the people on the ground, are tasked with this job of enforcing immigration or not. And that was our primary objective in this one case study, is to talk to the people in local police departments who are dealing with their orders, from whether it's coming from their chief of police or coming from their city council of what they're supposed to do.
So our goals for today's talk are to first provide a brief background on immigration law and policy. Next, we will introduce to you guys our case study and contextualize it by describing the city's demographics as well as its local immigration ordinances. After we describe our methods to you, we will focus on our findings and then offer some concluding remarks. Enforcing civil immigration law has historically been the responsibility of the federal government. These immigration laws are complex, highly dynamic, and often misunderstood. The primary purpose of these laws is outlined in a statute known as the Immigration and Nationality Act, or INA, is to 1, oversee the number of immigrants, the number and the type of non-citizens who enter the United States and for how long. Number 2, to decide whether or not they gain residency in the country. And 3, to determine if they become naturalized citizens or not. It is important to note that unlawful presence in the country is not a crime but a civil violation, and illegal entry in the United States is not a felony offense but rather a federal misdemeanor. Therefore, these actions in themselves cannot form the basis for an arrest by state or local authorities upon their completion. The Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, is the major national organization that oversees immigration in the United States, and it divides this function among different agencies. One of them is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, which is the investigative branch of DHS that was created after the September 11th terrorist attacks. And there is also the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which oversees immigration at the border. One major trend that currently stands out in the new frontier of immigration is the increasing convergence of immigration law and criminal law, which some scholars refer to as crimmigration, to describe how criminal law has been incorporated into immigration law, and to point out the American government's increased emphasis on the enforcement, detention, and deportation of undocumented immigrants. Thousands of detention centers have sprouted up around the country and are swelling with undocumented immigrants, as well as permanent residents and even citizens who have been caught up in the dragnet of immigration. Somewhat surprising to most people is that there have been more deportations under Obama than his predecessor, George W. Bush. For example, in 2010, there was a 70% increase in the removal of immigrants compared to 2008 under a Republican administration.
And the primary or the principal strategy that the federal government has used to increase these deportation figures has been transferring immigration enforcement duties to the state and local levels. Though the federal government does not require state and local agencies to enforce federal immigration, it has expanded their opportunities to do so. This was made possible under the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act in 1996, which allows state and local law enforcement agencies to partner with ICE and perform civil immigration enforcement functions that were once solely the province of federal immigration, the federal government. Another example of the criminalization of immigration is the controversial Secure Communities Program, or SCOM, created by DHS in 2008. With this program, fingerprints and other information collected by state and local police, really county sheriff's departments where it's happening in our local jails, is compared to FBI criminal databases as well as the DHS immigration database, which record immigration violations. If there's a match, ICE is automatically notified, even if the person has not been yet convicted of a crime. Therefore, a non-citizen can be detained and deported after being pulled over for a minor traffic violation. And as we mentioned before, Arizona has really been in the forefront of embracing this type of local immigration enforcement, as evident by Senate Bill 1070, which added new state crimes and penalties related to immigration. Though the Supreme Court struck down many aspects of this controversial SB 1070 law, the most controversial among the provisions was Show Me Your Papers law, which the Supreme Court upheld. And there's been widespread conversation about this, rightly so, right? We want to know what impact will these policies have on the ground for citizens, non-citizens, for public safety, and for law enforcement. And there's been widespread and warranted concern about the consequences of local immigration enforcement. Some states have proposed resolutions opposed to Arizona laws, such as California's Trust Act, AB 1081, which aims to limit local law enforcement's interaction with federal immigration efforts. And these fears aren't shared only by immigrant advocates, but they're shared by a number of leading law enforcement. For example, LA Police Chief Charlie Beck and former Chief Police Bill Brenton are strong supporters of Special Order 40, which has been implemented in LA, San Diego, and San Francisco. This states that officers may not use suspicion of immigration status as a reason to initiate police action, such as stopping or searching individuals. And these concerns, not surprisingly, are important when you have racially diverse communities where this fear is most high.
We decided to focus on one of the most immigrant-supportive cities in the country, and to protect confidentiality and promote generalizability, we decided to use a pseudonym to protect the identity of the location, the police department, and its respondents. The self-described City Different is located in the Four Corners region of the United States. The population is fairly diverse. The 2010 U.S. Census estimated the population of the Southwest City to be slightly over 146,000, comprised of 91.5% whites, 50.6% of which are Hispanics or of Latino ethnicity, 4% Native American, as well as 13.1% who were foreign-born. In 2003, the governor passed a statute that allows undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses in the state. A notoriously liberal community, Southwest City, has been categorized as a so-called sanctuary city due to its progressive policies aimed to protect and integrate immigrants into the community. As noted by Tremonti, the term sanctuary city is often used diversively by immigration opponents to blast what are best described as community policing policies. In fact, community policing policies are about providing safety, not sanctuary, to the residents of these communities. The police who rely upon community policing policies do not provide sanctuary to undocumented immigrants. They already have the authority to arrest criminals regardless of their immigration status, and they already work with DHS to identify these immigrant criminals. Under a Democratic mayor, the City Council has adopted resolutions that oppose the local enforcement of immigration and do not permit police or municipal employees to inquire about anyone's immigration status. The Southwest City, however, is not necessarily representative of immigrant-supportive trends in the state more generally. The County Sheriff's Department has consistently cooperated with ICE to detain and deport non-citizens. Further, the state's current Republican governor has been an outspoken critic of the state's driver's license policy for undocumented immigrants and is launching her fourth attempt to repeal the law. This has all resulted in a confusing patchwork of enforcement authority among county sheriffs and city police. What is relatively unknown, however, is how members of local law enforcement are experiencing these inconsistent policies and how they reconcile them with police practices on the ground. And our case study aims to shed light on these issues.
And just a brief overview of our research methods. After receiving clearance from the university's IRB board, as well as the permission of the captain of Southwest City Police Department, we conducted 15 interviews with members of Southwest PD or SWPD, which included male and female officers of all ranks, including patrol officers, detectives, sergeants, captains, and the assistant chief. The interviews were conducted in a variety of locations, including at the police station, on patrol ride-alongs, as well as in the field as officers were posted on duty. And I think this is one of the strengths of our interviews, that they were conducted in the field and we were able to include ethnographic observation as well as our interview data. We witnessed officers interacting with citizens and people who were presumably non-citizens to kind of witness their demeanor and protocol. The interviews lasted between 20 minutes and an hour, were tape recorded and later transcribed. Respondents were asked a variety of questions about their work and primarily how they felt about the policy, right? This came down from the mayor and the city council, who said, hands off, right? You're not allowed to ask or inquire about citizenship when you're pulling someone over. And this was a theme in our interviews where the cops consistently reminded us that this wasn't their choice, right? This came down from the city ordinance, and they were just doing their job, right? That's a common thing, that they were just doing their job. And we were curious of what they felt about it. And we found a range of different experiences in our interviews, and we're just going to highlight a few of the themes that came out. We had officers who voiced conflicting attitudes towards increasing their immigration enforcement capacities or responsibilities. One of the questions we asked them was, would you want more tools in your toolkit to enforce immigration? And we asked one officer how he deals with people who are potentially undocumented immigrants during a traffic stop, and a senior patrol officer recounted the following. He said, "Our hands are tied, really. We're not allowed to deport illegal immigrants even though they're illegal. And you know that when they don't have their social security number and don't speak English, they're probably an illegal immigrant. We're not allowed to get involved with anything in that situation." On the other hand, some officers felt as though immigration enforcement fell out of the purview of their duties. This really comes from the title of our talk. We're not border control, right? We're not border patrol, right? And this is captured in the quote where one officer indicated, "Well, my job isn't to enforce immigration. That's the bottom line. I'm a police officer. I'm not border patrol. As a police officer, I don't have the power to make an arrest on someone not being in immigration. I don't. Police officers don't. We're sworn to enforce laws, but I just can't make an arrest because someone is an undocumented alien. That's not my job."
So we were also interested to see in how officers felt that the city's immigration policy affected public safety. Again, our respondents had different and contradictory perspectives on this. For some, officers believed that the policy promoted public safety because it encouraged members of immigrant communities to cooperate with police as witnesses or victims of crime. One female sergeant recounted this incident. "I got flagged down, and this was just a few months ago, by a family, a man, a woman, and a teenage girl, and they flagged me down, and the mom looks really scared, and the dad says, 'We need to talk to an officer.' So I start talking to them, and the mom, in Spanish is saying like, 'Oh, no, we don't want to talk to this lady about me.' And the dad was like, 'I don't care, they can't arrest us for being illegal. My daughter was raped.' I was glad that they knew we were going to take the report and investigate. We were going to do our best to solve the crime, and never once were we going to ask if they're here legally when they haven't done anything." So because the immigrant family knew about the city's policy to not enforce immigration law, they were able to report this without fear of being deported. On the flip side, there were also respondents that expressed frustration with this policy. They felt that it reduced public safety because it allowed immigrants to offend and reoffend again more easily. One of the detectives expressed an interest in broadening local police's immigration enforcement duties. He said, and I quote, "I think the community wants us to have more leeway. They want us to be able to get rid of problems, whether they may be natural or people born here in this country or immigrants. They want to have that leeway to make the community safer, and I think there are laws and books that need to be enforced."
So to summarize our findings, the interviews with members of Southwest Police Department indicated that officers are conflicted about the city's hands-off immigration policy. On the one hand, the response indicated the policy allows them to prioritize criminal activity rather than civil immigration violations, and that the policy can increase public safety by assuring the fears of undocumented immigrants that, particularly witnesses and victims, that they should come forward and report crimes. On the other hand, respondents expressed frustration with the policy because they felt as though it inhibited their ability to keep track of offenders and could create a climate that even encouraged the criminal activity of undocumented immigrants. Ultimately, we hope that this case study offered an interesting counterexample to the comparatively aggressive immigration enforcement initiatives enacted in neighboring cities, states, and counties. As we outlined in the beginning, immigration laws are continually evolving, and it's important to study how communities are grappling with these issues now in order to create better laws. Our study is not without limitations. Drawbacks include the small sample size, the focus on one city and its police department, and we have plans to launch a comparative study in different cities to see how our findings compare to other policies around the country. It remains to be seen if the status quo in Southwest City will remain. What we do know is that more evidence-based research is essential for understanding and reforming immigration policy on the national and local levels. Such scholarship should also serve as the first step towards crafting immigration law that balances our civil and criminal priorities without conflating and jeopardizing them both. And this is a work in progress, so we welcome your questions and comments. And I just wanted to reiterate our appreciation for the fellowship that's supported our research. We couldn't have done it without the support for the Center for Equality and Justice. Particularly extend a special thank you to Dr. Knack and Dr. Thomas as the CEJ leaders, as well as members of the fellowship committee, including Dr. Hako Huang, Dr. Grady Hanrahan, Mr. Wheatley from the university, as well as Claudia Armand from the McCune Foundation. Thank you.